the stuff that I was listening to pull influence from vocally was like Third Eye Blind, Avril Lavigne, and Michelle Branch. Those were the three big ones that I was like, all right, I know what I'm doing for this one. It was probably the easiest one to write. Somebody hit somebody!
What's up, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Pit Therapy Podcast with me, Trevor. Kyle is out, Josh is out, so I am joined by Interpersonal. They're back. Didn't scare them away last time. I've got Jordan, Chris, and Lyle. And straight away, Lyle, I've got a bone to pick. We're getting right into this.
Okay.
Last year, we had you on right before Thanksgiving. We talked about raising Frank Sinatra from the dead, getting some Thanksgiving music, and all we asked for was interpersonal Thanksgiving music. You didn't give us crap.
Yeah. You think that. But Donna Lee is actually all about Thanksgiving. You wouldn't know it, but it's the spirit's there. It's yeah.
Well, good thing we're talking about this then, and you can make me eat my words. But no, that's awesome. But we just had Thanksgiving. How have you guys been?
I'm good.
Anyone can go.
Just eating too much food.
Yeah, unfortunately, you start at Thanksgiving, but you don't really stop until you hit the New Year's resolution.
Yeah. I'm all bloated.
Then you got like 1 week of like pause where you're like, I'm going to the gym, and then it's just right back on the bandwagon.
Yeah.
I don't eat dairy most of the year, and now it's like there's like 4 weeks where I eat dairy right in a row, and now I'm just like, ugh.
Oh my gosh, we just had a family party where we had like clam chowder bread bowls. Ate way too much, got way too sick last night.
Oh my god.
It was great though. So, but hey, we're coming up on the end of the year. What have you guys been listening to? What's some of like the new records coming out, or what's been on repeat as we're going into album of the year? Jordan, I'm going to put you last because I know we could be here forever with that. Chris, why don't you kick us off? What have you been listening to? What's like album of the year contender for you?
Well, I mean, we were kind of talking about it a little bit before we started recording, but my album of the year might be Squint's new album. I mean, I was looking forward to it for a long time. I know Jordan's and a lot of other people in the St. Louis scene were as well. It's just one of those albums where you can put on, I feel like, any song during any like activity, whether you're like cleaning or working or driving, and you're just immediately transported. The vibes are there, and you're just having a good time. And I recently went to the album release show, like I kind of mentioned, and it was just like another level, man. Like, it's so crazy to see like the scene thriving and people going nuts, for a band that's not, a giant national act that's touring all over the place. So it's really good to see, and it lets you know that the scene is alive and well. It's very healthy. So that would probably be mine. I mean, that's an easy one for me.
Nice. Lyle, what do you got for us?
All right. The first one that I've been listening to a lot is there's this band on Instagram I found that's doing like a lot of really cool kind of yacht rock, kind of, it's very like throwback vibes. They're called Penelope Road. They're really, really, really good. Another big one is Origami Button put out a new album this year. I forget the name, which is really bad because I literally saw them last night. Hindsight. They put out a new album called Hindsight. They were in town last night. They put on a fantastic show as always. And then lastly, the one that I've been literally like today, I've had it on repeat. Everyone knows I'm our resident pop music guy, and I actually think 2024 was like the best year for pop music in literally decades. So Short and Sweet, Sabrina Carpenter. I've been listening to that a lot. It's really good.
Okay. All right. Jordan, you got one.
Well, my favorite album this year was All You Embrace by One Step Closer. And as soon as that album came out, I just kind of knew. I was like, that's the one, man. It's so good. It's everything I love about emo. It's everything I love about pop punk. It's everything I love about melodic hardcore. The hooks are it's so catchy that it just bores into your cerebral cortex. The riffs are cool. Um, that's just a good fucking band, man. They're really good. But
Nice.
I do want to echo what Chris said, that the new Squint record is fucking amazing. That's in my top 5 easily. Um, I feel like we're cheating a little bit because Brennan was playing in the same room that I'm recording this in. Brennan was from Squint was playing us songs before the record was out. Was playing me and Chris and Lyle songs after he recorded vocals on the on our record in my
Oh,
basement.
sick.
And we were just sitting there being like, "Oh, this record's amazing. Why are we even putting a record out this year?"
Yep.
Listen, don't sell you guys stuff short. The Long Bright Dark is awesome. I have
Well, thank
had it
you.
on for the last 2 weeks, really going through it so that we can have a good conversation tonight. It's fantastic. And we actually just last week recorded an episode on He Is Legend. And I made sure that, like, what I really find interesting about the band He Is Legend is how they transition through sounds very seamlessly, very easy. And I have to say, this album, The Long Bright Dark, you guys capture that very well. I'm not saying you guys are like He Is Legend, like not the same sound and stuff, but the transitions between sounds, it flows seamlessly and it's great. So
Oh,
it's up there. It's
thank you,
great.
dude.
Yeah,
Of
thanks.
course.
To even be mentioned in the same sentence as He Is Legends is cool because I Am
Right.
Hollywood was, I mean, like, that's a classic record in my opinion. That's a great fucking album. And also, I White Bat is dope as hell. That's a great record too. But
Yeah.
that I Am Hollywood is that's classic, man.
Got to so they did the 20-year tour on it, and so I got to see that out at Furnace Fest. Seeing that at
Oh,
Furnace Fest in the shed, it was insane. Like super, like highlight nostalgia, everything about it was incredible.
that's so
Absolutely loved
sick.
it. So
That's so sick. I mean, I know me and Chris both would like appreciative of that record because we're both Every Time I Die guys, and that comes from like the same like, southern metalcore post hardcore thing. So it's like it's just that's cool, man.
oh yeah. The I don't know if you guys saw this, but did you guys see Dallas Green hop on stage with Under Oath to
I
perform When the
did,
Sun
yeah, for
Sleeps?
the first time in however many years.
Probably 20 something, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's crazy.
Absolutely
I actually saw a
incredible.
video of that this morning when I woke up
Yeah.
on Instagram.
Yeah. No. Fantastic. And when you
Yeah, that's
said
cool.
coming from that Southern riff rock, obviously, Maylene, you got to throw those guys right up on top. So,
Oh
but
yeah, for sure.
we are here to talk about The Long Bright Dark. This came out a month ago, month and a half ago. How long has it been now?
October 22nd.
October 22nd. So yeah, about 6 weeks ago. And like I said, since it's come out, I've listened to it a lot, especially the last 2 weeks since we've talked about getting you guys back on. It's fantastic. I'm super stoked to go through this with you guys. It is very different than the last album. So I know we've got 2 new members, Lyle, Jordan. Talk about why we're starting to make this transition from more of that pop punk sound to the 12 different genres you guys are trying to do in this album.
I
Anyone can
I
go on
I
this.
I don't know. Lyle, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it literally just comes from having, you know, just under half the band being a new influence on it. I mean, me and Jordan been playing music together since high school, so he and I have always kind of vibed together on a lot of things. So Jordan also has a habit of putting literally like hundreds of samples and demos in our writing folders. So we had a lot of things to pull from, and kind of a united front on all of these new sounds that we were trying out, and it just kind of ended up that way. I don't know how else to put it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a really cool experience getting to write and take a look at everything that had been written, and I think it just comes down to having that new thing in the mix.
Yeah, I
So
agree. I think like initially we were like wondering, obviously like with me joining in 2022, I guess it was like, okay, what are we going to do? Obviously the sound's going to expand a little bit, but I think we were kind of thinking, okay, we'll still do, pop punk, but we'll like build the sound out more. But then once we started to actually write, and then once Lyle joined, we were like, oh, okay, I think things make more sense to kind of take it from square one and act as if this was like our first release as this band together, like the five of us, because I think Chris has talked about this a lot. I think we write really well together. Like we'll come with like demos or ideas that are like somewhat fleshed out, but I think like the best stuff, and Chris has said this, as far as looking at the future too, the best stuff is when we've sat down and been like, okay, this is a cool idea. How can we parse this out? How can we like separate all the pieces of this? What are all the ideas that we can look at, and how can we make this even cooler? And I think just like it's really just become more of a collaborative process between the five of us, and like really I think it's just more voices. It's more organic, more collaborative, and it's just kind of natural. There wasn't like a conscious. I don't know. I don't think there was like a super conscious effort. I think it was just kind of a thing where it was like, okay, we're kind of going towards this thing. How can we shape it to move towards this thing that makes sense for the five of us? And that's kind of where it was for me, at least.
cool, cool. Chris, I'm going to jump to you here. Before we were
Mhm.
talking, or before we started recording, we were talking that interpersonal is kind of your baby. You were here with Evan and Aaron from the beginning, right? So for you, this transition, right? As we've developed sounds and we've gone into things, you also play in a hardcore band. So what's your feelings on going from something like pretty straightforward, such as like hardcore or pop punk and stuff like that, to the variety that we get on The Long Bright Dark?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, kind of to piggyback off what Jordan said, it was important to me at least that we weren't resistant to any sort of change that was happening. And by that I mean, like, if we had these demos that we were putting work into and it was kind of changing our sound, it was important to me that we weren't like, oh well, that's not like pop punk enough, so like we can't do that because it doesn't fit that. If it felt right and if it felt like us and if it felt true to us, then I wanted to make sure that we kind of like harnessed that and still had those pop punk influences, because I think to some degree we all still enjoy that kind of music. We just didn't want it to be just that. And to your point, I have always been more interested in weird music. Like some of my biggest influences, like early on, were bands like Mr. Bungle and ELO, and like old. Like Avenged Sevenfold and stuff, like a lot of the stuff that the Rev wrote, where there's just like weird choirs and strings and all that kind of stuff. So like I've always been into taking different genres of music, like some weird like polka bass line, and be like, well, what if we did that, but like we had like a punk beat over it or something like that. Um so for me, I think it just kind of got even more into my wheelhouse. I still like the other band I'm in is hardcore. It's very straightforward and it's fun to be able to just kind of like watch the crowd happen essentially while I'm playing in that kind of music, because it is very straightforward. But this band, it is more, you feel it more and it goes to more places, and I'm able to kind of like have more of a voice. Like I have a lot of independent bass lines in this record that kind of go in and out of weirdness and things like that. So um changing from something that's like very strict pop punk into something that we've been kind of mentioning that kind of encompasses all of our influences and brings things from like Lyle's uh, pop influences and Jordan's like more like goth rock and things like that, like throw chorus on every guitar part, that kind of stuff. All of that kind of stuff, it just felt natural. And I know for me, it was it was of a lot of importance to kind of embrace that and not resist it, because it is kind of scary. I know I had that conversation multiple times with Jordan of like, is this the right thing? Like, I don't want to put music out and people are expecting, like very knuckle puck story so far kind of vibes, and then we hit them with something different and they're like, oh, I hate this. So it was kind of a balance of being true to ourselves and our influences, but also still kind of having that same like pop punk DNA that kind of weaves in and out, and sometimes it's like very prominent and other times it kind of takes a back seat and we get to do something a little bit more fun or out there.
Yeah, I
Cool.
think just to kind of expound upon that a little bit, like those early conversations of like kind of that anxiety of, is are we doing the right thing? We're very prevalent because it was like we feel it's right, but obviously we're a little bit biased, so we can't trust ourselves in this. Where it's like, well, yeah, well, of course we think it's pretty good, but we luckily like a couple of like 3 months, I guess 2 months before the we went to actually the studio record the record, we played a really awesome, I mean, like packed show here in St. Louis, and we played mostly new stuff that nobody had heard, and like people were like reacting super well. People were moshing, people were like jumping around and enjoying it, and we are like, okay, so I guess we're not off the mark here. Putting in like post-hardcore, emo, indie rock, and shoegaze, and like a little bit of other stuff in there. So like it works, and that like DNA of catchy choruses is never not in the mix, even in the heaviest, most left field of songs on the record, which would be like Become Death, which is, almost borderline a hardcore song. It's still, I would say, is one of the catchiest choruses on the record, thanks to Lyle's like just like melodic drive through that song. I mean, I think that DNA is never not there.
No, 100%. 100%. So let's go through these real quick. I have up your kind of behind the scenes of the record, and you guys listed a whole list of genres here. So we've got pop punk number one, obviously the DNA of what Interpersonal was. That makes sense. Emo, post hardcore, indie rock, dream pop, shoegaze, melodic hardcore, grunge, emo gaze, grunge gaze, post rock, hardcore, emo grunge, soft grunge, noise rock, punk rock. There's
Oh,
a
are those
lot
the
there.
tags on Bandcamp?
Those are the tags. Those are the tags that
Oh,
you have
okay.
listed. Okay.
Yeah.
So going through that, I can hear pretty much everything that you listed in there. I hear it all, right? What were some of the band influences? Like, who were some of the bands you were listening to or trying to emulate, or what was like catching your attention as you were going through this? And we're going to go through all the songs individually, so we're going to break them down as well, but just like off the top of your head.
I think semi controversially, the one of the main ones was Brand New. Um,
Okay.
Brand New is a band that myself and Lyle really connected with in high school. And I mean, I can speak for myself at least. Them and AFI were like the two bands that I was like, oh, yeah, I want to be a musician for the rest of my life. Where I was like, this is what I want to do. Obviously, not. I'm not going to get into the whole controversial side of Brand New, but they are like The Devil and God Are Raging Inside Me is all time one of my favorite records of all time and super influential. I think that was a record that was super influential to us, as well as Daisy. And our drummer also is a huge Brand New fan, and we really throughout the writing of this record we converted Chris pretty hard on Brand New. Um, so that would be probably the one that we would like. That was like the unifying factor, I guess.
Okay.
Title Fight would be another one. Um, Thrice. Who else would we probably point to? Super
Uh,
Heaven.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
I
mean
know that
Brandon.
in terms of the vocals, when I was writing lyrics and melodies, I drew a lot from Wolf Alice and Catfish and the Bottlemen. I go back to them a lot. I like how they write
Okay.
notes.
Sick.
Mhm. I know for
Chris, you
me,
have a
like
lot of
bass.
driving bass lines. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, a lot of the bass stuff, I would say probably like Thrice. Is just stuff where it's like that's so cool. That's the coolest part of the song, and it's just like the bass line for the verse. Um, that and then like stuff that I guess like Sex Bomb, like Scott Pilgrim versus the World, like that's like another like even like Become Death, like that first like bass part is like very much like if Sex Bomb started playing that and it was on like soundtrack of Scott Pilgrim versus World, I feel like it wouldn't be out of place. At least that bass line. So just a lot of fun fuzz stuff, and then just cool little arpeggio stuff, and just driving stuff, just stuff that's fun to play. Because I think bass still gets a bad rap sometimes, where it's like, oh, you're just a bass player, but it's like, well, if you're not having fun, it's because you're not doing it right. You're not writing the fun bass line. So luckily I'm in a band where like I have kind of free reign to kind of do some crazy stuff if it if everybody's like feeling it and stuff like that. So I had a lot of fun, even compared to like previous interpersonal releases. A lot more driving stuff, but yeah, I would think if I had to like whittle it down, it would probably be Thrice. Thrice is the biggest sound like I feel like for this record for me.
Yeah,
Oh,
Thrice
I
would be
love
up there
that.
for sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I love
Yeah,
that
it's like
just
a little
because
bit of
of the
slow dive.
development of Thrice. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, very
Yeah.
much so. A
You
little
can
bit of
definitely hear
military
that.
gun.
So
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah, little,
Yeah.
some like kind of some of those like adjacent hardcore like drug church stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say also were like things that like in the back of our mind, but even like stuff like little bits. I mean, like there's like little moments where I would be like, oh, that's like a post rock part where it was like that was like explosions in the sky, or that's like a slow dive part, or that sounds like Dinosaur Jr., or that sounds like Morrissey. There's just like little things, but it was like always like let's like cherry pick like little ideas or like inspirations, but like how can we like push it back to us and like make it sound like us type of a thing.
Right. No, I've gotcha. Well, let's dig into the album because I'm really curious to actually go through this. And let me just first of all say 28 minutes, 52 seconds is like the perfect time. Like you guys like nailed it. I read it was what on Sputnik or something. Someone did a review and they talked about they felt like they wanted it longer. I love how condensed it is. I feel like you guys did so much in that 30 minutes that a lot of bands can't capture. And again, the way that it flows, it all goes together. I love your transitions that you guys have in there. Especially like right at the end, Donalita Loss. That transition feels that it's like it's a beautiful outro. It's fantastic. So let's dig in. Let's go through some of this stuff. First song is Washington. In my opinion, like if you didn't listen to the singles, if you didn't listen to Alabaster, if you didn't listen to Become Death, you would have thought this album was going to be Inner Visions 2.0, starting off with Washington. And I really like that, especially like if you're trying to capture your old crowd. So when you guys start off with Washington, why is this the first song on the album? And why is it set up Become Death? Because you give us some musical whiplash.
I mean, Washington before it was Washington, it was an intro. Like the that post rock tremolo guitar at the end, the way it builds up, like as soon as we heard that demo, it was just like, yeah, so whatever we do next, that's first. It was just kind of one of those things where once you had it, there was no other option. That was set in stone.
Yeah, I agree. The second I heard that, I was like, okay, so this is the intro. We're just gonna fit everything around this because it has those intro vibes, and I like that you kind of made the connection to Intervisions because Intervisions also kind of started with this like intro thing to kind of get you a feel for the record. So we did want to go back to something like that, but it's kind of a way to subtly introduce some new style while still having that intro, because you know we got like the super like fuzzed out guitars and the tremolo picking, and obviously Lyle's vocals are significantly different, and like the lyrical content significantly different. So like right off the bat, we wanted to be like it's still interpersonal, but it just hits so hard, and I never heard that song as anything other than an intro for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned Intervisions because it was like something that Chris and I wrote, and it was like it was something I sent to him, and I was like, "Is this stupid? Like, is this work for our band?" And he was like, "No, this is cool." And I was, because it's like I obviously wasn't in the band for Intervision, so it's like tiptoeing that line of like, if you like that old stuff, here we're kind of like giving you a little bit, but pushing you into a new thing. I don't know. It just, yeah, it works as an intro very well, and
Well,
kind of steps into that post rock thing, and just it's a good night driving song.
yeah, 100%. And what I was saying is like Intervisions 2.0 kind of thing is what you were saying, Chris, right? You start off with Bless All Your Graces on Intervisions. And then what happens though is you guys dive into the pop punk. You go into Faceless Heart right after on Intervision. Here, we jump into arguably the hardest song, the heaviest song on the album, Become Death. And like I said, it starts to become musical whiplash on what we get here in the best way possible. I'm not saying that as a bad thing. Let me just be very clear about that. Become Death is absolutely fantastic. And to go from that, like you said, night driving type of song into this song, like fantastic. So, Become Death, who led in the writing on this one? And what about this back and forth that you have going from Washington to Become Death, and then next song Spiral?
You're looking at the three of the people who wrote the song right here
Sweet.
in like
Yeah.
25-30 minutes.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think
Really?
I love the story of how that song came to be, because that song didn't exist for a very long time. That's the last song that got written, right, for the record?
Yep.
It got
Yeah.
written 2 weeks before we went to the studio.
Yeah, because we all met up for a writing session because we wanted another song, and we were kind of trying to like force something through. We were actually at Jordan's, and we were trying to force something through, and it wasn't working. And then we actually drew inspiration from a brand new song, right?
Vices.
Yeah,
Yep.
for Vices, and I had this like bass riff that is basically like a warm up. Essentially, it like practices string skipping, and it's just a fun thing. I've had it for literally years, and I've just never found a way to like work it in. And so we were listening to Vices, and we were like, well, we could do something kind of like this. It's very like high energy, and I played that, and we all loved it, and we ended up like recording that whole demo in like an hour and a half, maybe something like that.
Yeah, I think it was even
um
less. Like, it
yeah,
was just so organic.
it just happened, and like immediately we were like, all right, well, screw everything that we had and just delete all of that, because none of that was working. And then Become Death just organically happened. And I mean, I think it is the heaviest song that Interpersonal has, across like any of our releases. And I think a lot of that, you know, to kind of what we were talking about earlier about influences, like a lot of our hardcore influences came through a lot more, Jordan's and I especially. And like I'll never say no to like having a harder song on the record. So as far as like tonality and like why it comes after like Washington, I can let you know the other guys speak on it. I know for me, Intervisions came out, like I think it came out like March 2020, or like February 2020. So like right at the beginning of COVID. A lot of stuff has happened since then. So I think for me, this whole album is kind of like a view of the human condition, and like what it is to live and gain and loot and loss and all that kind of stuff. So for me, this was like anger, you know, just anger at everything that's happened and everything that will continue to happen, and how we're basically just kind of told to deal with it, and you know, all of that. But as far as like lyrical, like I'll let Lyle and those guys speak to it. But I know for me, the whiplash was definitely like that first song is like, all right, we're starting again, like all this stuff's happened, and then immediately into like, all right, well, fuck all this, this sucks, I hate all this, and it just goes into that. And I feel it kind of sets the tone for the record, because we do have a lot more anger and disdain and just like being over it, of like, what are we doing here, man? So I don't know if anybody else has anything to comment on it.
So I do want to say, Chris mentioned like a lot of me and Chris's hardcore influence coming through. I want to throw out there the person who wrote the breakdown was Lyle.
Yeah.
Lyle,
Sick.
Lyle wrote the breakdown. He was like, normally I don't really write breakdowns, but this song needs a fucking breakdown. And
Listen,
he
when the
was like, he
Sabrina
just started playing
Carpenter
that
hits
riff.
right,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it just
It,
comes
it
out
was
of
the
you.
1975 influencing me. Maddie Healy told me to put a breakdown in it.
Exactly. So no, it's great. And listen, if you guys want to roll through Salt Lake, it might be the only time it happens, but I will swing for you if you guys play Become Death. So
I expect some spin kicks for this song.
there we go.
But
There
no,
we
yeah,
go.
this
So
this song is cool. I mean, like it was not like it's almost like an accident that we wrote this song, because like the actual first song on the record after Washington before was like this like super fast pop punk song that was like 215 BPM, and it was like based on the outro riff of Washington, and
okay.
we were like, I don't know, man, this does not represent the rest of the record. So like the
I mean,
three of us got
that's
together and
honestly probably why we chose to make it Become Death the second track, and
yeah,
is to really broadcast that, like, okay, like, the DNA is still there, we're still the same band, that's what
yeah,
people get from Washington, but the message they get as soon as the next track hits is like, but shit's different now, it's all
yeah,
gonna be a little bit different.
yeah,
That's what it was like writing it, so I think it's what we wanted it to feel like when people listen to it.
yeah. And I think the
Well,
mission statement
listen,
with that song, it was
I
just
love
like
it. Yes.
noisy. Let's be noisy as possible.
I love it. I think that it fits very well. I think that it catches people off guard. Like I said, if they didn't listen to the singles and they just plug this in, it's going to just like snap them. Like it's very attention grabbing. Had you done a 215 beat per minute pop punk song, like I said, it would have been Intervisions 2.0, I feel like. So this definitely separates and differentiates what you guys were doing. And I agree with you guys. I think that it sets the tone for what the rest of the album is going to be. Like, this is the heaviest you get, but you don't lose what you guys were talking about before. Some of like Jordan, your goth influence, some of that darkness, some of all that stuff. Even though there's still some pop punk, there's some pop in there. This kind of sets the tone that there's an underlying darkness, heaviness to the rest of the album. It's great.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I think a lot of that came from just like what we wanted the songs to be about, and that a lot of that came from Lyle. And it was just like I think like musically, it was like, okay, we're in a different territory here, so we kind of need to like think about it. We need to approach it differently when we're writing these songs. So it just worked well.
love it. Love it. So we go to Spiral. And listen, I'm saying this with as much love as possible. This is the most radio rock song on the album, and I love it. But the message on it is pretty dark, if I'm gathering the message correctly. And I actually talked about this in our last episode too, but it reminds me of Foster the People, Pumped Up Kicks. And I see you shaking your head there, Lyle. So
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you a quick story that I told on the last episode. But when that song came out, it was around the time that American Horror Story came out, the very first season. Did you guys watch American Horror Story?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
first season was the Murder House, right?
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And Evan Peters plays the ghost guy who lives in the house, and he's the school shooter, if you recall that. The
Yeah.
only thing that I could get going through my head watching that scene was Pumped Up Kicks. Like, how messed up would it be to have Pumped Up Kicks playing while he's walking around the school right now? You know what I mean? And like, obviously, lyrically wise, you aren't school shooting in this song, but there's some darkness to it in a very palatable song for a lot of people. So, Lyle, I'm starting with you.
Yeah.
Where did
Yeah,
where did this come from? Yeah.
Pumped Up Kicks was a huge influence for sure. I'd say a bigger one, thematically very similar, was actually, again, I'm the pop guy. It's a 1975 song called "Looking for Somebody to Love." Uh, Similarly, that song is about a school shooting, but it dives a lot more into the kind of socioeconomic foundations behind radicalization and behind those kinds of acts of violence. And that's the part that really interested me, was like, not so much to me, as much as I love the song, the Foster the People song almost feels like it's kind of like a shock type thing. Like, hey, here's this really chill, really musical, really vibey song about this really horrible thing. I was a lot more interested in exploring thematically, like, what does that mean about our society that it's something that keeps happening. So that's I heard that a little bit in the 1975 song, and then I don't know what it was about that riff. It was that opening riff, that bam bam
Yeah.
that that put me in that headspace. And then yeah, the chorus, I think I'm gonna buy a gun, here for a good time, not a long time. That I wrote that first, and then it's in the verses that we get into. It's uh, literally every single person in the country is suffering a mental health crisis, and it's hard to afford, car insurance, or, like, more than half the country lives paycheck to paycheck. And it's like, yeah, that's how we got here. It's because, like, everything's fucked. And at a certain point, you can only take so much before you snap.
Awesome.
Like that Michael Douglas movie, Falling Down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chris, Jordan, musically, like, where did this come from? Because this has a very good pop punk beat in it right after
Yeah.
that first chorus.
There were 3 bands that influenced me on this song. It was Title Fight, The Wonder Years, particularly like Suburbia era Wonder Years, and then early Manchester Orchestra. It was just kind of like, okay, put together a little bit of like the grittier, like there's like that fast punk, like double time punk thing, which was like Shed to me, Shed era, like Title Fight kind of a thing, with like the bendy chords. It's very like a very Title Fighty thing, but like there's a little bit of indie rock and then a pop sensibility coming through in like the Suburbia era, like Wonder Years stuff. And like Lyle like even somehow tapped into that with the lyrical content, where it's like the Wonder Years had like a great hook of like mentioning like a person's name or like a landmark or something in the chorus, and like he did that in the chorus, and I was like, damn, I didn't even like have to say anything to him, and he like picked up on that somehow. But it was just like, stuff like that. um
I have a fun story about choosing the name Christine that I
oh
don't think I've
really?
ever told you guys.
Oh yeah, I
Uh,
don't know that.
So the bulk of the writing of this happened after a big breakup I had. That's what Washington's about. Um, while we were writing Spiral, I had just gotten like back on Tinder, and I was talking to this girl Christine. And we were talking for like a week or two. She adds me on Snap, and it's only then that she confesses that she's a sex worker, right? Which is fine. 100% support sex workers. A-OK, 10 out of 10. But it was this kind of weird moment where it's like, okay, I feel like the rug was pulled a little bit. And there's also this whole conversation about like, okay, what does that mean? Like, why does she feel the need to do that? Like, what kind of stresses is she under? And it was that whole kind of thing is just like, okay, so like, dating market's fucked. Like, interpersonal relationships between people who are dating is fucked. There's this weird economic undercurrent to the whole thing because there's like money involved now in both aspects. And it's that kind of like weird social phenomenon type of thing that makes people spiral. It was just like, okay, like within half a second of reading a single Snapchat message, my entire perception of everything I'd been doing for a week just changed. And that
Oh,
can make
dang.
someone freak out.
Dang.
Oh, I never knew
That's
that. Wow,
crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Chris, anything to add musically wise to this one?
I mean, I don't know if I have like song or band influences. I know for me, like when I was coming up with the first verse, that's like that little bass line, and then even some of the like fun little stuff I do in the last chorus. I just really wanted to lean into like how happy it sounded,
Yeah.
despite the lyrical content. So everything is, very like bouncy and like fun, and but then you're listening to the lyrics and you're like, oh, this isn't fun. Like this is
yeah.
it's a little bit more serious than that. And so that's kind of what I wanted to lead it into musically, is just like super upbeat, super poppy and fun. So that it like, juxtaposes those lyrics like super well. Yeah.
Sick. Sick. So, Jordan, like you said, songs that use names in them always capture me. The Wonder Years
hmm
do it. Dragged Under's
hmm
done it. There's a ton of bands
hmm
who've done it. Lyle, are we starting to get a little universe around Christine? Is there going to be additional interpersonal songs where Christine makes reappearances? Like Madeline?
All due respect to Christine, I hope the fuck not. I really hope not.
I gotcha. Now that you've shared that it was an actual person, that probably makes a little bit
Yeah.
more sense. So, okay. So we go on to the first interlude, seconds, minutes, hours. How did this come together? Because it is beautiful. It's fantastic. The starting with the nature sounds, the rain, all that kind of stuff, and then going to almost like the bells that you play in band class when you're younger, kind of thing. Like it's fantastic. So where did this come together?
So the interludes, I think like from the moment we were like we're doing an LP, I was like, hey guys, do you know the band Chiodos and how they do? And obviously everybody in the band knows Chiodos, but in All's Well That Ends Well, they have interludes. And I've always wanted to do interludes. I like play piano and stuff, and like I've never been like one of the type of people who like wanted to like do like pedal bass while I was like playing piano. Like that's just not doesn't sound super fun to me. But I was like, I want a way for us to kind of going back to some of the themes we've been talking about, do something different, do something musically interesting that isn't just, exactly what you'd expect. So luckily I'm in a band with a bunch of cool guys and they were totally cool with us doing a couple of interludes. And this one was tough. I think this one took a long time, because I knew I wanted to recycle some like melodic or like harmonic content. So like the two chord progressions that are going through is actually the end of Alabaster. The end of Alabaster, there's like a clean guitar that's just rocking back and forth on two chords. It's the same chords. And so I wanted to like take something else from the album and do something interesting musically with it. And I remember I was like sending demos to like Jordan and everybody, and I had like the piano and the glockenspiel was actually Jordan's idea. I had that stuff, but I had no idea how to make it more like cohesive without it just sounding like okay, they just like wanted to play some piano stuff. I wanted it to fit thematically, and I sent it to Jordan, and then Jordan, you can talk about like he's the one that added all the soundscapey stuff and kind of really brought that whole thing together.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of that stuff just came from, to be honest with you, me listening to like a lot of like ambient and soundscape stuff while I read. Like you go on YouTube and you're like, Skyrim, ambience, 10
Yeah.
hours, while you're reading like, a fantasy book that's like 1,000 pages. But a lot of it was like that. And it was like, okay, I'm going to find some like nature sounds. And I was like, okay, let's play with rain, let's play with, some thunder. I think there's like a fall, like town atmosphere thing put in there. And then Chris and I were like going back and forth one night and being like, we should do like some samples because we were already thinking about doing we had the sample in at the end of Washington and then we had the sample at the end of the Long Bright Dark, and we knew we were going to put a sample in Alabaster, and we were like, well, let's kind of like do some more sample stuff. So we were like going back and forth on like television, film stuff. So I was pulling some like things that have to do with like time and um, just like the movement of like things throughout life. So there, I pulled like the specific like passages from like Blade Runner and Star Trek Generations and like Casablanca, and I think the last one is it's the Green Mile, I think.
It is.
And it kind of like then transitions into like the thematically into Genocider, but it was just kind of like something that Chris and I were like putting together, like piecemealing, because we were like, we kind of don't really know where we're going with it, so like let's just kind of like throw these ideas back and forth, and we shot it to band, and people were like, that's actually pretty cool. Like it like makes sense. Like and it works as like a tone piece to kind of shift from Spiral to Genocider. So like it worked, you know. And it just it all kind of came from Chris's idea of being like, well, the end of Alabaster. Let's do something with that because it's just kind of like its own thing. But like if we like tie it in earlier, it becomes like a thematic like motif, and that's kind of cool. And
Awesome.
Chris comes from like the classical music theory world, so it made sense.
That's awesome. That's sweet. Yeah, like I said,
Yeah.
it's phenomenal. And I do like the connection between Spiral to Genocider with it being able to transition into Genocider. So we'll jump over to there. This song on the album, in my opinion, is the song that culminates everything that you guys have done. Like, you have a lot of different influences. It ends really heavy and stuff like that. You kind of get everything in Genocider. So, again, just talk about this song. This one obviously lyrically has pretty heavy lyrics to it as well. I mean, most of the songs do, but pretty heavy lyrics on this one as well.
This is kind of the song that like it's funny that you mentioned that because this is the song that kind of shaped the album for I think for all of us.
Okay.
Um like the first half of Genocider was kind of done. There was like one thing at the end that we were like kind of toying with, and we're like, I don't know if this works. And then there was a second half heavy section, and it just didn't work. And after Lyle had joined the band, like officially, because he had been like in the band for a couple months at this point, he was like, and we'd been playing the song with him. He was like, I've got a thing. Trust me, send me the file. I'm gonna go home tonight. It was like after practice, and like we were at our drummer Aaron's house eating pizza and watching horror movies because it was like right before Halloween. And all of a sudden we get like a text from Lyle, and it's like a full file, and it's like basically what you hear from like beginning to end of Genocider with like what we had created in the practice room, and then all of the stuff that Lyle had created, which was like basically the second half of the song. And we were like, this is what the record is. Like it's like, okay, we've got it. Like this is what we need to be doing. Um and this song was like heavily influenced by like like kind of like the dreamy stuff that we wanted to do. A lot of like Peripheral Vision, Turnover, um, as well as like Brand New, and then like leaning into some of the shoegazy, like fuzzy, heavy, like and some like post hardcore stuff. And it was like, okay, everything that we wanted to do was like on this song, and it just became like a song that
Right.
we were like very passionate about. And I think just like Lyle's contribution to it just made the song for all of us, and we were like, okay, this is something we believe in. This is what we're doing, you know.
Yeah, I'll say like I didn't know if everyone was gonna go for what I had in mind for that second half. So when I sent it and everyone was like, "Oh yeah, this is sick," it was like, "Okay, now we're off to the races. I know what I can get away with, so I can." But yeah, it really was. That was kind of the musically, I think the guiding light for the rest of the album was like,
Mhm.
okay, we have this kind of flagship for what we want this new sound to be, and now we have a reference point for everything else to kind of bounce back off of. So that 215 beats per minute pop punk song, we took that and we shot it through the lens of Genocider, and we're like, you know what, this doesn't work. Let's go do Become Death, and that's basically how it went from there on out.
Yeah, and even like Long Bright Dark. was written after Genocider, and it was like, this is kind of like, like Lyle said, this was the flagship, this was the lens that we needed to shoot everything through, because it was like, this is the standard. Like, it made sense, and like, it just continued to make sense the more that got added into it, between Aaron's drum parts that he wrote and then Chris's bass parts, with like the pedal note and the slides, which, I mean, you can talk about that more, Chris, but I think like that added, like, all that stuff, just people always come up and say something about that.
I remember being at practice while we were still kind of writing it, and Chris was like, "Man, I don't know if I like the stuff I'm playing." And I was like, "I think it sounds really good." And he turns to me and he just goes, "Really?" I was like, "God damn, I thought it was pretty good." Then he showed up and he had the slide stuff, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I get it now. I understand why he did not like what he was doing before."
Yeah, I mean, my that's my point before. Like, there's like that part where not a lot is happening in the low end, and at the time it was just the pedal notes, and I'm like, this is boring. I don't. This sucks. I don't want to do this because like I want to have fun. I don't want to be like, okay, it's time to play Genocider and the most boring song, and I'm just gonna sit here and. So I was like, I'm gonna do something else. I'm gonna do something crazy. And then yeah, so now I've got this like slide part, this slide tapping part. So I like hit the pedal note and then tap essentially, and that's my like anxiety moment in that song where it's like, you better hit it, because if you go to the wrong note, everybody's going to hear it, because it's such an exposed part and such a quiet part. But yeah, I think kind of to everybody's point, this was like the song where like when this song was being demoed, I was like, okay, we sound different now, like we're a different sounding band on this record. And that's where like some of those conversations started coming in for me anyway, is like, is this the right thing? Because this is like so different than what we're doing. And then kind of to Jordan's point, like everybody who's heard the song has been like, yo, that song fucks. And it's like, okay, we're doing the right thing. Like we're good. So yeah, I think it serves as a good barometer for the rest of the album. And it's kind of like a center point where everything kind of uh coalesces around that. And yeah, certain songs we were like, that's just not gonna work. It's gonna sound like Whiplash in the bad way, where it's just like, oh, they're just collection of songs, not like an actual album. But yeah, no, I'm glad. I might have been like a little bit hesitant originally with it, because it is so different. But I'm glad I trusted the process and like heard what everybody added to it. And yeah, I mean, it's one of my favorites on the record now.
Yeah,
Oh, it's
easily. And like, surprisingly, it became like a favorite song that people like to hear live. Like, even on tour in September, people were always like, yo, that like, that pretty song, and then it gets really gross. That song's pretty fucking cool, man.
Mhm.
And we're like, just wait till you hear it on the record. It's even like, you're gonna be listening to that song. It's pretty sick. We
Yeah.
enjoy it.
That's why you don't write boring parts, because inevitably that song is going to be everybody's favorite and you got to play it forever. And then you're like, man, I wish I would have added something else in this part. So yeah, write fun parts, kids.
there you go. There you go. Well, I'm glad that you had a fun part in that one, because the next one, Alabaster, in my opinion, is the bassline's time to shine. So we go from
Yeah,
fun part to incredible part. Let's talk about
yeah.
it.
This song, immediately, the moment that Jordan sent this one, I was like, that one's going on the record. Like, I'm fighting for that, because the that like opening like major arpeggio, like Stranger Things sounding thing. I heard that like the second that song started playing, and I was like, that is what I would play. And it like took me a little bit to get it under my belt too, but I was like, it's got to be that. Like, it can't be anything else except for that. And then yeah, I mean, there's just so many fun bass parts. The verse was a collaborative effort. I was really stuck on that. I didn't know like how complex I wanted it to be, like if it's just root notes or whatever. And then Jordan was actually kind of like messing around on the guitar and like doing that weird little like first verse, like boom 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 dun, 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 dun. And I kind of picked through that, and I'm really happy with the way it turned out. And just it fits with like the weirdness of the song, like the melody is kind of weird, the like lyrical content's kind of weird. If you're like listening to some of the metaphors and stuff, you're like, what do you say? So I that was important to me, is like I wanted something weird and kind of out there. And then the ending of this song is probably my favorite like moment on the record, like the
Yeah.
stage dive core part. Um that was it was fun to see that come together. I think that that counter melody that Lyle does, like that came together while we were recording it. He like stepped outside, he like
Yeah.
showed it to us and was like, "What do you guys think?" And I was like, "Ah, I feel like it needs something like else there. Like there needs to be something to like come in." And Lyle's like, "All right, give me like 15 minutes." And he like went outside and like figured it out and came back in and did that. And it's awesome. I love playing that part live.
Yeah, I think like it's weird. That song's weird because like at first I like had the demo and I sent it to Chris first because I was like, I don't know, man. This is nobody's gonna like this one. This one's kind of dumb, and because it's just like a punky shoegaze song. It's not gonna work. And Chris was immediately like, "Yo, is there like a weird Stranger Things part in that part?" Did you like record a bass part? And I was like, "No." And he's like, "Okay, then I'm just hearing it. Like, we need to actually like put this into like a DAW. Like, let's work on this." And that just came through it. And yeah, I like one of my all-time favorite recording moments of the record is what Chris is talking about, where like it was just me, Chris, and Lyle, and our producer Gabe, and we were just sitting there on like vocal day. So like everything is like in the song, and we're like, man, this part rules, but like we need something. And Lyle's like, I was kind of thinking that, and just the fact that he went outside in 15 minutes, wrote those killer lyrics with the reference to Dune, and you know, and just like amazing counter melody, and it was like, that's it, man. Like it was like, okay, this is the glue that is holding this song together, and it's really funny because like that song was always like, okay, this is a cool song, but it was not going to be a single whatsoever. But in like it was going to be on a comp, so we like that was like the first song that we started mixing, and like we started like like after like talking to Gabe and like working on mix notes, we started texting each other and we were like, "Is this a single? Like this song kind of rocks, man." And we're like, "Fuck, I think we should do Become Death and this is as first single. Like this is kind of rad." So it's like that song just kind of prevailed and it seemed to be like a favorite of people, which is cool.
I absolutely think that if any one of us had suggested going into the studio that we use Alabaster as a single, the rest of us would have laughed them down. So it is crazy that by the time we were done mixing it, we were like, "Oh yeah, of course! Like that's the first one out. That's it."
Because it only does the chorus once,
Yeah.
but it's like one of the most catchy songs on the record.
On paper, it's a bad single, but it worked out for
Yeah,
us.
yeah, that is true. Yeah, that's a good point. On paper, it is a really terrible single, but it just works.
Yeah.
All right. If you guys have been listening for a while, you know that my internet sucks. So I'm sorry about that. So,
You're
okay.
good.
I heard the majority of everything you were saying about Alabaster, wrapping up it being on a compilation and that kind of stuff. The only question I did have about it is why did you guys decide to make it one of the singles?
I think because it just turned into such a fucking banger. Like I know once we got like for me personally, once we got like the like some of the rough demos back after we were recording it, it just had a vibe to it that I feel like we don't have elsewhere on the record. And the ending like did a lot of heavy lifting for me too. Like I said, it's my favorite part of the record as a whole. So I know for me, like it was just like how well the song turned out. We were like, oh, I think this needs to be a single.
Sick.
Yeah, yeah. As Lyle said earlier, like on paper, terrible single, but it just like worked perfectly. Even though it only does the chorus once, it kind of really only does everything once. But it just, I don't know, it just works. It's
Yeah.
cool.
So it was interesting because when you dropped the singles and I heard Alabaster, I was like, okay, so we're very different now. And I wasn't sure exactly what to expect. And then you guys throw out Become Death. And I'm like, oh goodness. Like, how is this album coming together? And so, like, again, knowing that Genocider was kind of the glue that holds this all together and the way that it all pairs. I mean, I've said it 3 times already. Like, it flows together so seamlessly. There's nothing out of place on it. It's great. So I it was a little bit nerve wracking for a second, but you guys nailed it. So uh, we'll jump to Out of Time. So in my opinion, this is my favorite song on the album. I love this song, and I actually was playing it for my wife today, like an hour ago before we hopped on, and she's like, I feel like this would have been like my junior high, early high school days. I'm like, yeah, it's like late '90s, early 2000s, like it's a good, catchy rock song. It's solid. So talk about this one. Talk about Out of Time.
I definitely got huge Y2K kind of throwback vibes when I heard the demo. Just like you were saying. And I did my best to try and feed into that. The stuff that I was listening to pull influence from vocally was like Third Eye Blind, Avril Lavigne, and Michelle Branch. Those were the three big ones that I was like, all right, I know what I'm doing for this one. It was probably the easiest one to write.
Nice.
Yeah. Third Eye Blind was a big thing. It was like, okay, this song reminds me of losing a whole year.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, yeah, because this was actually funny enough. When I auditioned for the band, this was what I auditioned with was my
Oh,
lead guitar
interesting.
parts.
It's been
Um,
kicking for a long time.
yeah, so it's an old song. I mean, we played it on not this most recent tour, but the tour in 2023. Um, so it's like it's a pretty old song, but obviously it's been revamped since then. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's probably the most old school or interpersonal thing on the record. Um, but it's like something that we were like, okay, we got to have it because it's bouncy, it's fun, but it also kind of like has that like, you know, like Lyle said, that like third eye blind kind of a thing, which doesn't really exist in the old interpersonal stuff, and it's got the really heavy bridge.
Yeah.
Um, so it's like it's still like pushing forward, but yeah, that was a song we were like, all right, this will be like a fun song to put on the back half of the album, so it's not all dark and dour.
Yeah. The album's called The Long Bright Dark, and we needed to have some bright on there somewhere. So
Not just spiral.
Right.
No, I love it. It's great. Like I said, the lyrical content, everything about it, you don't go too fast with your pacing and everything. Everyone can learn these words. If you only know one interpersonal song to sing at your guys' live shows, it's gonna probably be Out of Time. Like in all honesty, like it's great. Chris, anything
Well,
else to add to that one?
No, I mean, I think they kind of said everything about it. I think it is like the most straightforward song that we have. I think it is the oldest song on the record. Like
Okay.
we've had this song for a long time.
yeah, either
Um,
this or Donnelly, I guess.
yeah, Donnelly, I think Donnelly might be like as far as like when it was written, I think it might be a little bit older. But as far as like its life in interpersonal, Out of Time is the oldest one because we had our previous vocalist had like we performed the song with our previous vocalist with
Oh
different
wow.
words and all that kind of stuff. So it's an old one.
Hmm.
And I think it was one of those things where it's like it's been around for a long time. It's a fun song, so yeah, like we were like, yeah, we gotta put it on there. And yeah, to Lyle's point, we needed a little bit of bright in the long bright dark, so we wanted something a little bit more fun and upbeat.
I love it. I love the breakup of it, and coming after Alabaster too, coming off of something that's not as like heavy as Genocide or Becoming Death or something like that. Like it fits very well with where you positioned it also. So the positioning on it's great.
Yeah, that was like something that we like were super anxious and like painstakingly took like time on was the sequencing of the record. Um, and like you mentioned like transitions earlier, but like that was something very important that we were like putting effort into as far as like where the songs needed to be. Um, and like early on when I remember us sitting at Utopia when we still practiced there and not at Chris's house. We were like sitting there after like practice, just sitting around talking. And we were like, this next record needs to be like, if you played it front to back, it needs to have like a through line, almost like something like Marvin Gaye's like "What's Going On," to where it's like there's connective tissue between two songs. So like there's the sample of Washington going into Become Death. There's um, the static of Become Death going into Spiral. There's the interludes and stuff like that, and like there's connective tissue. But like the outro of Alabaster, it ends on like the opening chord of Out of Time. So there's like little bits and things that kind of like work as like connective tissue, which is something that we just like had like a lot of fun putting together and like figuring out because it's like very ear candy, like nerdy things
Yeah.
that like we were kind of like, oh, this will be fun to do. But yeah, that the sequencing of that is like very important.
Sick. No, I love it. All right, Lyle, you're on. Donna Lee, my Thanksgiving song. Let's talk about it.
Hold on, I'm trying to remember the words to Donna Lee. Hold up. Uh, I don't know. In all seriousness, you know, it might not be a Thanksgiving song, but it is a song about gratitude. Really, it's a song about reflection. It was the last song we wrote lyrics to, I
Hmm.
believe.
Okay.
Like a week before we recorded the record, I think we finished
Yeah,
it.
because it was kind of hard to write lyrics to. It's very still. It's very contemplative, and like the rest of the album is very, you know, thematically meandering and kind of it doesn't like to stay in the same place. So it's weird to kind of shift gears to a song that kind of is asking you to do that. But yeah, it's I think probably the most personal song on the album. It's basically me coming to terms with the fact that I'm like in my late 20s now, like 30s really coming up, and looking back at, you know, what did my youth mean and what did it mean to me. So it's not a Thanksgiving song. I didn't want to let you down. I tried my best, but it's a song you could listen to at Thanksgiving. Let's put it that way.
All right.
Yeah, I think
No.
this one took a long time to come together because this is also another like really old one. And this is one that we actually released before. It was kind of like an acoustic version. Like there was just the guitar parts and like I think some piano and like stuff like that. There was no percussion and no, I don't think there was even bass on it.
No bass,
Um,
no drums, nothing.
yeah, with our previous vocal, and it was like we had an idea to kind of do like a basement session B-side kind of vibe, and it ended up not coming like fully to fruition, but that was like the one that we put out. And then so whenever we got Lyle, we were like, well, let's repurpose it. Let's, you know, do make a ballad basically, essentially, because we don't really have those. And I think there was some resistance for a long time because like I didn't know what to play other than just like root notes. And Aaron, I think, had some ideas, but we weren't really sure like how the song was going to be like structured or like how it was going to come together because it was even like the original version of it, like the structure of the song was very weird. Like it was like verse, chorus, verse, and then just like bridge till the end or something like that. It was really weird. But I'm super happy with the way it came together. It's some of my like favorite Lyle stuff on the record.
Yeah.
Like the second verse where he's got like the harmonies that like stack on top of each other as the verse goes on. Super cool. Love everything about that. And I mean, since we've gotten the demos back for the record, like I've listened to this song a lot. Like I think it's a lot of fun. And it's something so different. But to Lyle's point, it still kind of like fits thematically with what we're trying to do on the record. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and when we were recording the record, uh I remember like Lyle laid down like the main vocal track and Gabe was like talking to him in the vocal booth and he was like, I mean, do you have any ideas for harmonies? And Lyle's like, yeah, I've got some ideas. And then he just like ripped the entire song, like did like 3 layer vocal harmonies the entire song without like stopping. And like Gabe turned off the intercom and he turned around to me and Chris and he goes, man, it really pays to have a good fucking vocalist, doesn't it? We're like, yeah, man, it does. And he goes, he's pretty good, man.
it
And then
was
he's
like
like,
the
all right,
most.
yeah, that was good, Lyle. Like, let's try it again.
Yeah, it was like the most efficient vocal session I've ever seen. Because
Yeah.
they were literally like, he's like, all right, let's run it again, and then he would just sing the whole song with the harmony line, and then we'd do it again. And he would just sing the whole song in the in a different harmony, and then it was done. And it was like, oh, okay, that's super cool.
So this is what it's like.
Yeah,
That's
right.
dope. That's awesome. So the note that I have here is going from Donna Lee into Loss. Like this could have been the ending. Loss with the punk cellist is like a beautiful, beautiful outro. And you could have ended here. So how did Loss come together? How did the punk cellist come together? Like I know we talked about the interludes and wanting to put that all on there. Chris, is this your piano then? And like what did this song come from?
Yeah, this is like my most emotional song, or at least the one that I like put the most of myself into. Because this one, this where I said the other interlude took a long time to come together, this one was done really early. So it was starting off as a dedication to my grandmother actually, who passed away in February of this last year. And so I wanted something, she was always like my biggest fan, biggest supporter, of like everything musical. So I wanted something that like I could kind of be like, this is the culmination of all of the musical experience that I've had. And I wanted some piano in there. Cello is always sick, like when you have it on a song. So this one came together really early on. And kind of similarly, musically, the chord progression at the beginning is the same chord progression as the bridge of the Long Bright Dark. So when everybody starts doing like the gang vocals and then everybody comes in, those chords are the same as the lost chord progression. So it was just like another little musical idea of like we're gonna take that and put that there. Um, so yeah, this song it was deeply personal to me. I wrote this one kind of just like by myself and then kind of sent it to everybody and was like, what do you guys think? And everybody seemed to really like it. So I was super thankful to be in a band that like first of all let me write like a cello interlude in the middle of a rock album. And also was like so supportive of that song being on there. But I knew I didn't want to do like MIDI cello because I feel like you can always tell, even if it's like really good MIDI cello. So I wanted a real cello player, and I just kind of put out feelers on Instagram, and it was actually our friend Wes Hoffman that let me know about the Punk Cellist, and like he had done some work on some of their songs, and so I reached out to him, and I had the song like programmed. I used Guitar Pro, so like I had notes like sheet music for it and all that kind of stuff, and had like a MIDI file of like me playing it and stuff, and sent that to him, and he just sent back a couple of takes and was like, pick your favorite. And then we just had those two separate files, made sure they like lined up, and then gave them to Gabe while we were recording, and he kind of did all the magic on it with the reverb and all that kind of stuff to make it sound cohesive and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm super happy with the way that came together. And it's like I said, it's the most of myself I've ever put into anything musically on like that's like out there. You know what I mean? So I'm super happy with how it came together.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And like I said, honestly, like you guys could have ended with this and it outros beautifully. And I feel like it would have had a very good sense of completion with that. But then you guys throw on The Long Bright Dark. And this is an ending song. It's fantastic. It's great. It feels like a closing song. It's pretty dark in there, but it develops into like brighter sounds and stuff like that. Where we were talking about Genocider being kind of all encapsulating, this is very much all encapsulating of all the sounds on the album, and it's great. So, number one, why was this used as the title track? And why was it the closing track?
As far
Um,
as the title track, we had actually been floating around a couple different titles for the album before
yeah.
we really finished writing it. So it wasn't so much that like we listened to all the songs and this was like, all right, this is the one that represents the album. It's more so that like by the time we'd finished writing it, that name fit the song so well, and we'd already had that as a title for the record, and it was just kind of serendipitous. Like there wasn't a moment where we were considering calling the album Donna Lee. Really, it's just we had this name for an album. We didn't know if it worked, and then once we had this song, it was like, okay, it works for both. That's just what it's gonna be.
Hmm.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. We for a while we just didn't have like an ending, like a closing track, and we were like, God, we were kind of just like banging our heads against the wall, trying to figure out like what the hell would an ending track to this record sound like. And funnily enough, like this song was like partially written in like a moment of flippant frustration at the end of practice. I forget like who started playing, but like I think Evan started playing the intro riff, and then we were just like, hold on, that sounds like something we could use, and then we just started like working on it. And I'd say this is the song maybe we worked the most on the whole record because it does so much stuff. Um, and it kind of just like it's like it's very much like a musical journey. It's very much all encapsulating because it's very like dense and heavy, but also sparse and pretty, but also has like these different layers of like sounds coming through, a lot of intricate guitar work, a lot of intricate bass work, a lot of layers of vocals. Aaron has a ton of cool drum parts, and then obviously we have the guests with the from the St. Louis scene on gang vocals, and then like the big outro with the lead guitars, and then the sample to end things out. It was just like, okay, this is the one that we were like the most worried about and the most excited about. And it just like it is kind of still shocking to me that it came together as well as it did, because it's just in my head I was like, there's no way that we're going to be able to pull this off to what I like we have in our head, and I would say we surpassed it.
Sick. Yeah, that gang vocal part at about like 2 minutes and 30 seconds in, like it brings it full circle here. Like that's a very pop punk feeling part to the album. And like I said, this is again, it's very encapsulating. It goes through everything and it just sounds so good. And then the way that it outros, this was a very good ending to the album. So, you guys have anything else that you want to just throw out about the album before we kind of put a conclusion to this?
Check it out
Um,
if you haven't listened to it.
Oh
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
please do.
yeah, hopefully some of the tidbits are interesting. I know like there was a lot of stuff that was intentional, that like kind of to Jordan's point of like even like sequencing, like going back to Lost, like Donnelly ends on like a G chord and then like Lost ends on a C chord, so there's like a whole cadence to it, and like how those songs interact with each other and like the order in which they come through was pretty intentional, and like there's a lot of like kind of care and love put into it. So yeah, if you haven't listened to it, then you should definitely check it out, because we're all super proud of it and we think you'll like it.
Yeah, and
100%.
I think Gabe, our producer, deserves some love. Encapsulated Studios, he's incredible, and Studios incredible. Gave us like full reign of all of the gear that he had, whether that be the mountain of or the wall and mountain of pedals that he had, the closet full of pedals, the hundreds of amps that he had, and we utilized quite a few of those. And just him being patient enough to let us send him notes, paragraphs of notes for each song, and being like, okay, this is what we want to do with this song, and him being like, okay, cool, and showing up day one and being like, yeah, I got all that reference in my head, and him being like, hey, how about we try this? And he like actually took like a pretty hands-on role of like, this is how can we like shape this album to be what you guys want? And like I think that's really cool that he was able to do that. And he's amazing, awesome
Sick.
dude.
Awesome. No, 100%. The Long Bright Dark. It's on all streaming services. Definitely check it out. Last question I have for you. Favorite song off the album? Chris, start us off. Where are you going?
uh I would say probably it might. I think it's still. That's a tough one. I'm gonna say Become Death. Alabaster's up there, but Become Death just because of the story of how it was written and the fact that it is like perfectly in line with what I just like listen to on a normal day to day basis. So I think Become Death, definitely my favorite on the record.
Sick. Jordan?
um Changes on the day, but I would say like Genocider is like the one for me. Like that's the one I always am the most excited to play. And I'm like always most interested to hear what people think of that one, because like you'd mentioned earlier, it's very all encompassing. So it's like, you know, I'm very interested to hear like how people react to it. So I love that song. It's a lot of fun to play.
Sick. And Lyle?
Uh, I think it's probably Spiral. I think it's the one thematically I enjoyed writing the most. I think that I think it's really fun to play live, and it's the one that I find easiest to get out of my head with when we play it. So
Sick. Like I said, I've listened to the album a lot over the last couple of weeks. Out of time, it's so easy to get into. It's so accessible. It's a great song, but there's not a bad song on here. Like, you can go through the whole album. It's very cohesive. Everything, like you said, is very intentional, and you can hear it throughout. Like, if you listen to enough music, you can hear it throughout. So you guys did fantastic. Definitely check it out. The Long Bright Dark. I seriously appreciate you guys. We are going to get you back on when LP number 2 comes back out.
Looking forward to it.
So sick. All right.
Might
Well,
be EP instead.
hey, you know what? Any music is acceptable at this point. So we'll take it. But you guys stick around for just a minute and we'll make sure that this all wraps up. But for everyone else, catch you next week. Peace.